Hello and welcome. It's time for round 3 of the Team Draft Super League. I'm Randy Bueller. We will have Owen Turtenwald on camera next round for commentary. I'm joined by Matt Sperling. And this has been a fun night so far. How's it been for you?
Stressful, but no, really fun. Yeah, it's one of those things where I could tell there was a little bit of fighting in the draft, so you don't know when you lay out your deck how it's going to match up, if you're going to have the upper hand, not the upper hand. I didn't learn a lot during deck building about where we stood, and then the first couple matches were pretty close, and so it's not like we're not running away with it. We got a little bit of a lead, but really exciting games and fun games against Reid there.
They've basically all been close matches too. I mean, you guys are up 3-1. Obviously, that's great for you guys, but I mean, your match against Reid had these crazy intricate games. The off-camera match between Paul and Owen was just absurd too. It's like Paul sideboarded into this control deck that's just an amazing matchup against Owen, but Owen was somehow keeping up, and Paul had like 2-for-1 him 4 times, but flooded out. And then on the last possible turn, blue trial gets him 3 good cards, and suddenly Paul's back in the game. Just crazy game to win there. And
there's transformational sideboarding has a couple of really big advantages in this format. Open deck list is huge. You know what you're facing.
Right.
And what might be best configured, whereas normally, maybe I only saw 10 cards, but I really want to shift. And then also you just have all these hate-drafted good cards in your sideboard ready to go. I might have taken away, black cards from somebody, and now I can board into a black deck if I want to. Sideboarding was actually really important in the match between Reid and I as well. I couldn't quite figure out what the right configuration was, but there was a lot of different possibilities there. And,
you took Heaven out?
Yeah, for game 2, I took it out because I didn't want the double. I thought the double red was a little bit tough. I wanted to take my second mountain out. I wanted to put the black cards in. Okay. And then just killing a couple Drakehaven tokens. I feel like the games where he's set up to win with Drakehaven, I'm either going to blank them with the convergence or I'm going to lose, and there's not much wiggle room even if I sweep them.
Okay. Sweeping them once wasn't going to help?
Well, I mean, it helps, but on balance, I took it out. I put it back in game 3. I felt like, okay, now I'm back to the red deck. I'm on the front foot this game. Reid saw me play a super slow game 2. He's not gonna go back to something like Dune Beetle or whatever. So it's time. I felt like it was time to go back to there's a cat and mouse game there with how aggressive my configuration was.
Yeah, and you basically did tempo him out in the third game. I mean, he had a handful of gas, just didn't have time to deploy it all. So. Interesting.
Yeah, it came together there for me. I drew my red. I got that spring to mind to get the red source just in time to have a clock.
Indeed.
Splashing aggressive creatures is pretty complicated in terms. I mean, it's not. I have 3 mountains in my deck. I got a number of sources, but that's not how you traditionally think about beating down, splashing the aggressive creatures. But my deck has so much fixing with multiple spring to mind, with the 2-drop, the channeler. With the 3-drop in Aura that goes on a land. I just felt like I had enough pieces there. Plus, I can always try to go on the front foot in the mid-game, too. His deck is just so slow.
Fair enough. You couldn't see this part, but we also had a tiny cameo from Brian Hacker, who was in Las Vegas for the World Series of Poker and visiting David Williams, sitting next to him, kicking back, watching some team draft. And I don't know if everybody knows Brian Hacker, but he is literally the elder of the team draft tribe. This is the guy who was there back in the 90s when the format was first coming together. This is the guy who was essentially glorifying the team draft circuit. He wrote an article called Pool Halls of Magic that really, as a guy who was watching the Pro Tour at this point in season 2, 1996, 1997, he's talking about the Pool Halls of Magic and, just the late night scene sounded just amazing. It's, people would book their flights home from the weekend Grand Prix or Pro Tour for Monday morning and just stay up on Sunday night.
Yeah, I was a kid. I was a kid in that scene. So you said he was there. He was there when that draft started happening. Well, there was the Costa Mesa Women's Club in Southern California.
Yes, it was.
Hacker might have been in the first team draft I ever saw, right? He was certainly
sure.
It was. I learned all kinds of things about the Magic subcultures, about these formats, and the Magic, they all kind of grew together. Really fascinating. And I wasn't old enough to really be a full participant, so I was a spectator. And maybe there's some viewers that are younger and new to the game that are kind of where I was at that point, and just kind of looking at this and going like, wow, I understand about 15% of this. That's how I felt at the time.
Yeah, Hacker was also the guy, he and his teammates taught the world to beat down. Like, we played these crazy formats where all you could do was block, and like Mirage came out, they figured out how to actually just attack for two as the dominant strategy. Anyway, I could keep going on forever, but we got a match to watch. Let's head down to the action. All right, here we go. Scottsdale Foundation, a pair of close 3-game wins in the second round. They're up 3-1. What do you think of these hands, Matt?
Well, Paul has kept his hand because he has the literal best card in his deck by a wide margin.
One swamp, no mountain because it has Trial of Zeal?
I mean, Paul is an aggressive. He likes to keep.
That is a crazy keep.
Like, he's basically saying, okay, if I get 2 lands in my top 3 cards,
yeah,
I'm very, very, very likely to win. If I don't, well, I can still possibly use the trial later to kind of get back in the game and try to win. Obviously, he's hoping it doesn't come to that, and it looks like it is, unfortunately, for him.
Yeah. I mean,
good news, though, Huey doesn't have much going.
I mean, Paul's draw, basically, he has 2 shots at a mountain. If he has a mountain in his top 2, he's just going to win. He does need a third lane relatively quickly, but I mean, even just 2 drop,
right.
He needs a mountain to function. Wow. But yeah, he basically needed 2 lands in the top, I don't know, 3, 4 cards. Did not get there. Man, there's the mountain, but it's turn 5.
Yeah. Feels like too little too late.
You didn't sound surprised that Paul kept that draw. I mean, meanwhile, Huey's, of course, finally got to 5, summoning Shimmer Shell Scrapes and beating him down. So you don't sound surprised that Paul kept that draw. Paul does not like the mulligan. But would you have kept it?
I would be tempted to keep it too. I mean, we talked in deck building about how powerful his deck was going to be with all those cartouches with the trial. Now I understand, you're susceptible to exactly what happened to Paul here, but then you also got to remember, look, when you're mulliganing, there's ways to lose that game too. So I don't know. I'm of 2 minds about it. Ultimately, maybe if I thought, look, this hand has literally all the tools I need to beat my opponent's deck, just a couple lands short, on the draw, that's a reasonable keep. I might have kept it as well.
Interesting. Well, it was a quick and brutal game. Paul's keep did not work out. Huey straight to 5. Shimmer Scale Drakes get there pretty quickly.
Yeah, if you look at Paul's deck with multiple Thresher Lizards, it looks like a deck that mulligans pretty well. I think now that I'm looking at the list, I'm starting to think that mulligan might have been the wiser choice there, because you can envision, I think he's got a more powerful deck than Huey. Huey's got a lot of cards that are suboptimal in his configuration. I actually think, I mean, obviously setting aside results oriented, I initially thought, okay, that seems kind of reasonable, but now I would lean mulligan.
Like, I thought it was a mulligan. When I asked you about the hands, I'm looking at Paul's hand going, well, this one's about to change. When he kept it, I could see what he was thinking. I mean, you point out the red trial is obviously the best card in his deck. He's got 6 cartouches. He's got a red trial. He's stuck to the black-red version of the deck against Huey, it looks like. Against Owen, off-camera last round, he actually sided to do a Grixis control deck, brought a blue trial in, and just was able to 2-for-1 Owen until he fell over and died, finally.
So that draw step right there, you might have missed it. The Nefcrop Entangler, I mean, that's massive. That kind of brings the whole thing together. Even if it gets pacified by compulsory rest, it can still carry a black cartouche if it needs to kill the. I mean, there's a lot going on here, but that creature is a huge start for Paul. And so Huey is not going to be pleased with the result if he decides on the 3-1 this turn.
Well, looks like he's going to tap out for the Spearmaster.
So bad news for Huey. Yes, this looks somewhat like a blowout. The good news is he gets the 2-for-2 by getting a 2-for-1 back on compulsory rest. So the aura is trading for the aura, the creature for the creature, so to speak. He's going to maintain parity there. and Paul will end up with no creature and 3 R's in his hand, pretty dependent on the top of his deck.
No, Huey just says go. He wants to play Vizier shenanigans.
Interesting.
He's got a Juror's Resolve and a Vizier of Deferment.
So both those cards in Huey's hand get much worse with public deck lists. So Paul, right now, this pause in the action could easily be Paul consulting his notes and saying, okay, what could this be? All right, Vizier trades for the black cartouche. Not too concerned about that. And so I think he's aware of this possibility, but what's the alternative? Never attack. Again, it just kills the aura. It doesn't knock out the creature.
Right, the creature comes back, and here we are. Paul ships the turn with an Electrify up. He's just going to take the 4, just takes the 4. Labyrinth Guardian.
Yeah, Huey seems advantaged here. That could change if Paul draws a creature that's more substantial than what he's got.
Yeah, Angler Drake's hanging out in Huey's hand, though, waiting for one more land.
Yeah, it's a good point. So that leaves Huey with an advantage on board, and you could argue an advantage in the hand. That's always a great spot to be, where you've got your head on board and you've got a parity of resources in the hand. That sounds like a great spot. That's a good draw for Paul, to be honest. That draw 2. Now, if it's 2 land, it's not great, but if it's a business spell, that could really impact the game. And more mana is great, because eventually he might want to unload a bunch of different cartouches.
Looks like he's ready to put a replacement black cartouche onto Nefcrop Entangler. Man, you were totally right about how huge that draw step was. Paul would be dead if he hadn't had a creature to put these 2 black cartouches on.
Yeah, that was the first big turning point. And maybe Huey drawing that 6 land is the next turning point. Maybe Paul declining to exert here. Jared's Resolve will kind of clean up the mess. So there's, but given that the counter didn't go on the Labyrinth Guardian, this has got to be an exert. And there you see the exert. So Paul, playing pretty intelligently here around kind of Jared's Resolve. He's not going to go with shrink the Labyrinth Guardian, attack with a 3/2, which looks on the surface to be the most advantageous attack. Instead, he's going to say, no, I'm going to shrink the creature that doesn't come back if it dies, and exert my guy. So now you'll see Huey use the trick anyways, looking to double block, but now the protection effect is going to be somewhat ineffective because Paul can assign all the damage to the Labyrinth Guardian. So there's a lot of counterplay there. And that turn could have gone, I think, worse for Paul had he tried to do it a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, that was effectively a 2 for 2. Plus, there's a -1/-1 counter still on the Vizier.
Yeah, it's still, Paul was behind. It by no means solved the problem. But if you look, Paul is setting up a lifelink creature with haste. So Paul planning ahead and saying, okay, how can I trade down the resources on the board, because I have kind of the next level is in my hand.
Yeah, and he got the trick out of Huey's hand, right? He essentially slogged his way through some tricks. Like you said, setting this up. Man, I really love the way Paul's played this. I'm not sure it's going to work. I mean, both Angler Drake and Compulsory Rest are pretty good against this creature.
Ooh, that second cartouche is something that, Paul's going to really regret that when he sees Angler Drake. Having a second cartouche of Zeal means you can just go ahead and run that turn back and kind of stay in it. Putting a second aura on the creature for no additional benefit, not using the haste, not using the block trigger. I think that's I won't call it a mistake, but it's going to register as something that Paul regrets now that Angler Drake knocks it off.
Six land came right on cue. Angler Drake did in fact knock all that off. Electrify kills the Drake. Amit comes back.
So yeah, Huey, 7th land puts him even further ahead because now he can play 2 spells in a turn. Paul's in some big trouble here.
He's definitely on the back foot. 2,
This
3,
has got
4,
to be a
5.
creature, right? Oh,
Yeah,
that's huge.
Scorpion.
That's really, really big. Not in terms of size, but in terms of its impact on all three of those ground creatures are now going to be blanked. Paul still needs help in the sense that the flyer and the 2 ground creatures are going to, that's more than what Paul has going on, but that's still a huge development for Paul.
Both players empty-handed, by the way. They're all in. They both drew land off the top in the first part of this top deck fight.
Yeah,
Paul would love to trigger the lifelink on the Scorpion, but he also has to play defense. So
he's got 2 life sitting there in the compulsory creature. I think it's interesting. He chose to not shrink the flyer, which could alter the clock more drastically. He chose to knock out the Vizier. I would have shrunk the flyer, thinking that just in terms of my clock, a 2/3 flyer presents a much different clock than a 3/4 flyer. So Paul's made a few interesting decisions here, and I can see the hands, he can't. And so, but it's all, these games have a lot of play to them. This is a fun format that way.
Paul cashes in the 2 life. He's got, all right, a 3/2, but not an answer to the flyer. The 3/2 does let him attack with his life linker.
It's nice it's nice to have Death Touch on your creature that invites a double block, right? So that's something that plays to Paul's advantage. And
you see Huey consult the deck list. What tricks does he have at instant speed? In black-red? Off camera, by the way, Reid Duke just finished off a tight game 1 against David Williams. Reid had 3 life left as he dealt the finishing blow.
All right, so looks like Peach Cardinals looking to even things up if they can win both these matches.
Indeed. All right. Flyer's still coming over. Yeah, I think Huey has to make that double block and get the life linker off the board. Now his flyer is, again, kind of one more draw step away. Gravedigger.
Now, Gravedigger and Baleful Amit, that sounds like a real good plan against the flyer. Decision paralysis is gonna change that math pretty drastically, as you'll see in a second.
Oh, is Paul just dead?
Yeah, Paul's dead. He doesn't know it yet, but his plan is to kind of get the life linker out there, take one more hit, trade out the Gravedigger, and all of that is just trumped by the paralysis. A card that you would only play for kind of short unplayables. It means I did my job passing to Huey, but it's not that bad in blue-white tempo. So
yeah, and Paul sees it. He even had the Binding Mummy defense. He was ready to deal with being tapped by Binding Mummy, but decision paralysis taps both his creatures instead of falling to 1. Paul falls to dead. That is a match win for Peach Garden Oath. They pull it to 3-2, and we should now be able to bring you guys some bonus coverage of Reid Duke against David Williams. Those guys are just getting started with their second game, so it'll take us a couple minutes to set the hand cam up, but we'll have Athena go over there and pause those guys. It looks like we'll be able to get you right the very beginning of the second game. Like I said, Reid Duke up a game, so if Reid finishes that off, we already got 3-3. Now, we haven't had any of these TDSL matches go the distance. We haven't even seen a game 8 yet, much less a game 9. I think game 7 is the farthest we have gotten, which is kind of surprising to me.
Yeah.
Does it feel like we've just seen an above average number of blowouts so far?
No, I think it's just small sample size.
It's 6, obviously.
It's easier, it's snow in general. Things are pretty snowbally sometimes. If we saw Justin Cohen in one of the rounds just have a green deck that looked amazing. You expect that deck to steamroll. I think as this thing goes, you're going to naturally get. Sometimes you might see 2 9-game matches in a row. The next 2, who knows?
We could. While we have a second, by the way, let me hype up next week. The last match of this second round is winner's bracket match. So it is a win and in for top 4. It is limited resources against Channel Fireball. Quite the battle. I mean, Channel Fireball had to be one of the favorites. Probably them and PGO had the most picks coming in, right? There's 3 Hall of Famers. That's Efro, LSV, Ben Stark. But then you've got kind of the people's team, right? You've got the stream team, Newmont the Nummy, Marshall Sutcliffe, and Paul Cheon. That's going to be fun. That is also a late start, by the way. We haven't had that on all of our schedules leading up to this, but That is also going to be same start time as this week, so 6 o'clock Pacific time. That is not, I'm saying next week, but in fact, we're taking off the 4th of July just to round out the housekeeping updates. So that's 2 weeks from tonight, July 11th, 4th of July, obviously a big holiday stateside. So there will not be a show in 7 days. We'll be finishing up the second round on the 11th. I'm not done hyping that match, by the way. July 11th, if you know your release schedule, that is the Tuesday right after Amonkhet hits Magic Online. Sorry, not Amonkhet, Hour of Devastation. So Hour of Devastation will have been on Magic Online for 2 days, but we're drafting it. Like, sets on Magic Online, we are rolling the draft format. That will be Hour of Devastation.
So that'll be fun. That'll be fun on a few levels. You've got, like you said, that headliner versus Cinderella team kind of story, a new set. And the new set, you know, my first instinct was to say, okay, new set, maybe that advantages the underdog team. My second thought was, wait a minute, that underdog team probably used a lot of practice to kind of bridge a gap. Won't that hurt them? So I don't know how it's going to play out. That's an interesting question, but
yeah. It's tricky, right? I mean, you figure Luis and Ben and Ifro will not have gone through all their Pro Tour preparation yet, right? They haven't had time to break the format.
Right.
But at the same time, you're right. I mean, the Marshall and Kenji and Paul, these are guys who just draft and draft and draft constantly. I mean, especially Marshall and Kenji. So, I mean, those are guys that you think they need those reps. I don't know. I feel like it helps LR a little more.
You know, it's really funny because I was just leaning slightly the other way. I would disagree with you. But again, just on a first impression, I would say that, look, so let's start from the base case. If nobody ever gets to see the cards for 1 second before it starts, you have to think that favors the Hall of Famers.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. It does. All right, well, that is a story for 2 weeks from now. Now, though, we've still got this match hot and heavy. Let's get down to game 2 between Reid Duke and David Williams. All right, here we are. Reid Duke up a game and hoping to equalize the overall team match. All right, I am going to agree with you. The thing we were talking about right before the break, whether the brand new Hour of Devastation, not having time to practice that, who does that help more? It's got to help the Hall of Famers more.
Yeah.
I think I agree. I was thinking LR just because random variance has to help the underdog, right? The more crazy things are, the more variance there is, the more just chaos you introduce to the system. I think that just increases the odds of the Cinderella pulling an upset.
Yeah, but this starts to look like if it's a boat race and you have a variance that your captain has to navigate through that variance. You know, that dynamic changes. So I know I agree. It's not obvious to me, but that's the way I was leaning.
I mean, I would certainly bet on CFB's first impressions of the set first.
Well, sure. I mean, they're going to be favored no matter what, and just in terms of who's on that team and their pedigree.
It's just how much does the edge change?
Exactly. And so back to this match, Reid Duke doesn't have black mana, does have his most important card in Drakehaven. We talked about Paul has a 3-mana linchpin enchantment in the red trial.
Whoa!
Wow.
So
a hand that looked good but a little bit shaky now just looks hideous.
David brings in Forsake the Worldly, 3-mana disenchant. Got to be in from the sideboard.
Oh, he main decked it.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, what did you guys know about? I guess the Drakehaven was passed. Was it for the Drakehaven?
Yeah, Paul passed the Drakehaven. I passed the compulsory rest.
Wow. Nice. So you guys talked about that during deck building, and Lynch was like, I'm going to put this thing in the main deck. Awesome.
Yeah, and in fairness, I mean, Dave didn't have a bunch of playables extra, so it wasn't like the world's most amazing decision, but it was a clear inclusion. And we did mention some of those cards that we passed, and most importantly, we knew Dave was passing. I mean, we knew that one of the most important cards in Reid's deck, not just a card, but kind of the card. And sure enough, look at the deck list. That's what Drakehaven is to Reid.
crazy.
Now, Reid is not out of this game, because if you look at a horror of the broken lands can really kind of shore things up, but he's got to find a black mana first.
Yeah, not without a swamp, it can't. Do you violent impact the swamp here if you're Reid? he's doing other things, but like I look at my opponent on 4 planes, 1 swamp, and I'm starting to maybe I just want to stone raid him.
You can't, because you just bounced those who serve, so
I guess
it doesn't really you can't hope to really blank your opponent's strategy, so that becomes a pretty unattractive play. Indeed, Reid going with Ancient Crab.
He could have done it instead of the Galespur.
Sure.
He's declined that line 2 turns now.
No, that's fair.
I mean, the cycling does have value when he's color screwed too. So I mean, I'm not saying Reid's wrong. It's just I don't know.
No, it's absolutely worth pointing out. I mean, violent impact. You usually cycle it, but that's one of the edge cases when your opponent draws 4 and 1 in a deck with a lot of black cards. So it's possible, but when you're behind and you're kind of on the back foot, a little bit tough to justify.
That's fair. All right, Dave adds a bat to his board, hastes it up, and turns most of his creatures sideways.
Yeah, and this isn't as threatening as an attack as it looks, right? It's basically just the bat coming over. Dave is setting up kind of Lord of the Accursed to make his board a little bit more intimidating. Reid hits his 5th land. It's not the swamp that he needed. It unlocks Deem Worthy, but again, he's just sitting on a cycling card, his biggest creature that he needs on defense. So he's really biding his time until he can get that swamp. This turn, we might see cycle Deem Worthy to kill the Blighted Bat, relieve the pressure, get me closer to the swamp.
Yeah, try to draw a swamp.
Wouldn't surprise me if that's what we see. He has multiple. Yeah, so indeed, again, this has 2 benefits. You're talking about taking all the pressure off me right now that I can see on the board, and getting me 1 card closer to hopefully swamp.
There it is.
Swamp. Did Reid play a land on his turn? He did play a 5th land. Okay. Dave does a little cycling of his own.
Yeah. How much green does he have?
Dave has 1, the Roar of the Worm Hydra, whatever it's called. Hooded Hydra, what's it called?
Yeah.
He has just that 1 card, which it's nice to have a dual land, because then if you hate draft a card like that, thinking maybe my opponent can use that, I want to pass it, then all of a sudden, okay, I guess I'll play it. Has an Evolving Wild, 1 Groves, and 1 Forest.
All right, the horror is now in play. Nobody flies anymore. Dave, wow, turns them all sideways. He's relying basically on an impeccable timing.
He drew the right card. Right, he drew the right card that allows him to make that attack. So I think his turn becomes pretty interesting now from Reid's perspective. How do I block? What do I block? This is the kind of board that it doesn't jump out at you what the obvious block. So Reid's experience comes into play here in a big way.
I mean, Reid's also, he's sort of, I guess I haven't looked at all Reid's cycling cards. I see single untapped island, and I feel like he's representing a bunch of cycling cards. I assume Reid has some cycling cards for a single blue mana in his deck.
Yeah, but how could he have it in his hand? He's been deprived of black mana. He didn't use all 5 mana last turn. It's actually not really possible for it to be in his hand.
So you think Dave's got the read? There is no cycling card here. I don't need to worry about it.
Well, his top of his deck, he would have had to cycle into a swamp and then draw a card that cycles for 1 blue. Otherwise, he would have cycled that earlier.
He's been spending all his mana. He's got a violent impact. He hasn't managed to cycle the whole game because he hasn't had the mana for it.
No, but literally last turn, he tapped 4, left the blue up, cycled the Deem Worthy. So it's possible.
Yeah, I mean, because this block does not work out for David. I mean, David, if he's going to go he's going to impeccable timing the horror, right? No, he didn't. He's just going to play creature. Okay, so Dave was guarding against it a little bit. Well, I thought he was going to impeccable timing the horror. If he'd really had the read, that would have worked.
Yeah, it would have worked, but then Dave's like, okay, well, if you want to block my token, then all right, I'll play around somewhat for free. it would have worked out for him. And now I think Dave is going to go wide, and Lord of the Accursed has an ability that kind of makes the zombies go even a little bit wider, and just say, look, I'll just ignore that horror. I'll continue to ignore Ancient Crab and try to put pressure on you that way. But Reid's got some other creatures out of the board, so this gets kind of dicey for Dave from here.
Yeah, it's not like Dave's even all mono zombies, right? He's got a camel, he's got a cat, he's got a scorpion.
Right. He's got a whole menagerie of various creature types. This is, I would call this kind of team limited tribal. No one's gonna pass you 23 zombie cards, right? So you have sub themes, and I mean, I guess Finkel's team managed to do it and give Chi on that deck, but most teams are not going to let you have that zombie deck.
All right, well, Dave says good enough. Those who serve can have menace.
Yeah, and so he's got the creatures that aren't zombies. He really could care less if they die. Soul Stinger, gladly, right? And then Sacred Cat comes back as a zombie. So, and the 3/5 Caravan, there's no easy block there. So, despite the various creature types, despite the fact there's way more toughness than power on this board, Dave is he's finagled it into a successful attack. It looks like, and so Reid's now sitting here thinking, not only what do I block, how do I double block? Again, a really complex combat.
Right. You've also got the dance of cycling versus impeccable timing. It's kind of tricky here too.
It's a great point. Two of Reid's creatures can grow.
One of which currently has 3 toughness. It's like Reid could cycle before he turns them into blockers, so that impeccable timing is not even a card he has to play around. Maybe he wants to block and see if Dave's going to play a trick, and then he can cycle as a response. This is a tricky little dance. Yeah, it looks like Reid is going to cycle before he turns anybody into a blocker. He's at least thinking about it.
Yeah, I don't know why you would do that.
Well, it means you don't have to defend your Sentinels from impeccable timing, is what it means.
But you can just let one resolve, and then they all have 4 toughness.
All right, Reid declines the option to cycle before blocks, lines up a pair of double blocks on the 2 menace creatures.
Yeah, it's a good block. With 2 cyclers in hand, Dave's best option is to look at this board and go, okay, I know I can kill the horror. The horror is the biggest and best creature. I'll put the 2/1 first and the horror first and make sure I get the horror. Anything else that Dave does, I don't see anything that works out nearly as good as that. If he tries to get cute and timing in response to the first cycling, the second cycling saves it. Again, that's why I don't see the logic of pre-combat, and neither did Reid.
Yeah.
So here you see Dave does find, he locates that line of, okay, put the skirmisher first because now I get that creature in a worst-case scenario, and I'm going to be able to kill the horror unless there's 3 cyclers, which, come what may, if there's 3 1-mana cyclers. So I think both players played this combat well, right? I mean, their block looks good from Reid's perspective. It's going to get those who serves off the board, and then Dave is trying.
He is obliged to cycle once, right, to get the 5th point of power.
Correct.
But you're right. He'll cycle once. Impeccable timing will get pointed at horror, and I don't even know if Reid needs to cycle an additional time. Doesn't actually do anything, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Dave just, dotting his I's and crossing his T's in terms of what his plan is.
3 damage is
thinking not only about which order. I'm sorry, say that again.
I was just looking at it's 3 damage coming through. Reid is falling to a single-digit life total, but still 8, and looks like he's going to be knocking a pair of 3/5s off the board. I mean, there's more 3/5s where those 2 came from. I mean, the camel is still hanging out.
Yeah, I mean, Ancient Crab is doing a nice job on that. I think the big development is the horror, a really powerful card in Reid's deck, no longer being with us. And then Reid's going to get a couple. Now he's going to see 2 or 3 fresh cards on top of his deck now.
I mean, Dave can try to hit the Sentinels, though, right? Like, there is still, I think, a legit decision. I mean, you and I can see the hand. So we're looking at this saying, oh, right, you trade impeccable timing, point that at the horror is definitely going to die. But from Dave's perspective, if Reid cycles once, and Reid's going to have to move first, right? Dave should yield priority because right now one of those who serves is going to survive. Reid's going to cycle, and then Dave has got to be tempted to kill the Sentinels and save those who serve by doing it. Like, this impeccable timing has got to be tempting. It's got to be tempting to try to hit the Sentinels here because it is a straight up 2-for-1. It is kill your creature and save mine. Where is he targeting it? Okay, he goes for the horror.
The horror. So
go for the horror.
You're absolutely right. There's definitely a temptation there. When Dave ordered blockers for some reason, I just made him for. It just seemed like he understood that okay, the horror's got to go. I can deal with the 2/3. I can deal with the 2/3 any day of the week. An 8/6, not so much. So I think it's just a matter of priorities, and I think the horror was just such a big priority that you wouldn't want to overextend and hope to kill a 2/3.
Yeah. All right. Reid did not bother cycling Scarab Feast because it didn't do anything. He drew land off the cycling and land for his draw step.
Skirmisher comes back off Embalm. There's
the Hydra, but no green mana.
Yeah, so now 2 green sources left in Dave's deck. Reid, we said he's going to get a couple fresh cards. The fact they were both land definitely hurts him. But I think the Crab and the Dune Beetle, they do a really impressive job of stopping Dave's board. It really makes – I mean, Dave doesn't have a board really from an attacking perspective. So Reid recognizes that.
Let me get this right. You just described Ancient Crab and Dune Beetle as impressive. That's what just happened?
Well, look, Reid's been kind of playing from behind the whole time, and still things did not go that well from last turn, and he's still fine.
I'm just checking.
Now, do you cycle Scarab Feast to your end step? You would?
I think I do, yeah. Dave's like, please block my Sacred Cat so I can upgrade it into a zombie. Reid's at 7. He has to kill it. I think that's right.
Yeah, so Reid will oblige. Wants to preserve that life total. It's one of those things where the higher life you're at later in the game, that might allow you to double block instead of chump block. So I think that's the way Reid's approaching that, saying, okay, fine, you can have a zombie. I'd rather have my life point.
He does not cycle Scarab Feast. He's content on this board, I guess.
A mummy from Dave that would kind of take him off Honored Hydra, but not really because you could still embalm it later in the game. It's probably a card you just cast.
Like to welcome the viewers who've come over from Paul Cheon's stream. Paul doing his last stream before he moves to Seattle. Cheon is joining Wizards R&D here in a week or two. He will play out the Team Draft Super League, though. I got enough friends and enough pull still in R&D that I'll make sure we shake Paul loose when Limited Resources has matches to play.
Yeah, he's heading north to Don the Black, and he's giving up professional Magic for the behind the scenes Magic, which is a different kind of fun. But good luck,
yeah.
Good luck to him. Reid with no shortage of lands here. He's very disciplined with the Scarab Feast. When you're playing a blue-black cycling deck like this, it's also important to note that Scarab Feast in your hand means that when you draw one of your Cycling Matters cards, like a Drakehaven, I think we know Drakehaven's in exile right now, but a card like that, keeping that one cycling card, I think that's something that Reid is really keen on. The next horror that he draws, he can power it up as opposed to it being kind of naked on the board. And he just looks at this game saying, says, "I'm in no rush." Now, Tech Prop Elite might change that.
Does not appear to have. I think you're just right. All right, so he waited for one more draw step, and now he's like, all right, the board's no longer stable. Time to cycle.
And I think that's like, you can kind of see the thought process there. And I think it's important if you're trying, if you're watching this trying to improve. I mean, he was very disciplined with it, but then he also recognized that he doesn't have one mindset of conservative or aggressive. He has a shifting mindset. So when he saw Take Crop Elite, he said, okay, well, now I can't afford to hold on to that cycling card. I'm going to have to catch it in. He does that, and I think that's something you'll see from good players time and again. They wait a little bit, and then they realize when the tides have shifted, I have to change gears. I can't afford to hold a cycling card anymore. Reid's just drawn so many lands that, I mean, his hand was kind of forced, but you can kind of see how he worked through that. There were certainly previous turns where he could have cycled.
Meanwhile, Williams has not been drawing lands. Miasmic Mummy's just been sitting in his hand.
Yeah, so Dave's saying,
I think, waiting to draw something bad. Finally, he has a card he wants to discard.
Yeah, and
willing to discard anyway.
Yeah, and you can start, and you might at this point start thinking about math in terms of give my creatures menace, exert the Tech Crop Elite. Okay, does that give me too much for my opponent to handle from a blocking perspective? So this Reid is really hanging on by a thread.
Electrify.
Yeah, it helps as much as anything.
Or Top Crop Elite. What's your target?
So the zombies on the board are a 2/4, a 3/3, and a 2/2. Yeah, you've got to really think about what your blocks are going to be. But I think it's got to be the elite, given that it has evasion and it pumps everything. So you see that go, because that's just... But now, if Dave makes 5 attackers, so, of course, to block everything, you would need 2, 4, 6, 8. So he's not going to be able to block everything, but Reid does have enough life to let through 2 of these creatures. I'd be tempted if I was Dave.
Menace, turn them all sideways?
Yeah, I'll turn them all sideways first, then give Menace. That's a good... You don't want to get that same trick that Huey played on you.
Sure.
But yes, same difference. And I think because Reid has so much more toughness than power, he gets to kill things when he double blocks, but he's probably going to fall to 2 life. I mean, it's...
Yeah, he's falling to 2. He's falling... No, he can... Barring a relevant card in his hand, Reid falls to 2 on this board. That's the most life he can preserve. He could choose to fall to 1 if he takes a hit from a 3-power creature instead of a 2.
Right. He cannot block 4 creatures.
Correct. He can only block 3 creatures.
Yeah, so that's the combat math shortcut. Okay, he can only block 3 creatures. That leaves 2 getting through. The 2 smallest is 4 damage. He could choose to take 5 if he's knocking something out.
I'm with you. I think you turn everybody who's not Lord of the Accursed sideways, activate for Menace, and let Reid figure it out.
So yeah, and so the actual blocks are like 1/4/2/4 on Miasmic Mummy is probably automatic. 1/4/2/4 on the Mummy is a Eat Your Mummy. Then 1/5 on your 3/5 that doesn't have Menace. Yeah, from there it gets a little bit trickier.
He can't kill a 3/5. Like, I think both 3/5s are going to survive.
Yeah. There's no killing. You're right. He can't put more than 2 creatures. Yeah, it doesn't have the power to do that. So you're looking at. So maybe it's 2/3 on 2/2, 1/4 on 2/4 on 3/3, 1/5 on 3/5. Chump block Soul Stinger, take 5.
Here's the attack. There's the Lord activation. Now, Reid has probably been trying to figure these blocks out as well. Can he... I mean, he wants to kill 2 creatures here. He can kill the cat and the mummy.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing he can do, and I think that's what he has to do is go.
So, and fall to 1. He kills the cat. He kills the mummy. He blocks the camel.
He eats the mummy. Eats the cat. Eats the mummy. Eats the cat. Only loses the 2/1, so he ends up getting a 2-for-1 on the board. But he trades 4-5 life in to do it. So obviously, like, there's no way to emerge with the great, but I think that's the best he can do, I suspect.
Yeah, this looks right. He's going to lose his skirmisher.
Yeah, so the whole time he's gonna eat two creatures and lose one creature. Yeah, and it's not great because I think the next attack is still, well, now he's got 4 blockers and there's 4 attackers. Yeah, that's actually he's stabilized now. He was stable before that draw step, and now he's got an extra cushion, a 1 creature cushion, because he managed to take out 2 zombies, which was pretty critical.
Yep. Yeah, Dave did not have an attack even. Reid was not required to top deck. But top deck obviously covers a lot of David's potential outs. Meanwhile, Hydra just hanging out in Williams' hand. That is not.
Look at that. Look at Reid. He reckons.
Wow. Get in there. Doesn't want to play to not lose. Prefers to play to win.
Okay, so Dave looking for a forest or an evolving wilds first, and anything but a land second, I imagine.
Reid plays his last land. Kopesh. Not force an attack through.
So Menace on... No, because the Serpent and the Crab have that under control. So no, the Kopesh is close to some blank cardboard on this board.
Pretty close to a brick. Yeah, the fact that there's a 6/5 on Reid's side definitely makes
now. Yeah, right.
The Kopesh mortal 3/5s may have finally come to an end.
Right.
David does still have 23 life to play with.
He does.
Many draw steps, but Reid has stabilized at 1. Wow, Sweltering Suns. Does not a lot.
A card that could have been pretty effective.
Could have.
2 turns ago.
The cycling may be the more relevant part of that card. All right. Now at least it kills 2 creatures.
So what does Reid have left in his deck in terms of finishing this game off? Because, Doom Beetles and Ancient Crabs don't do it. The Drake Haven's gone. I guess there's a couple more additional horrors. I mean, he's got... His remaining 10 cards is probably a lot of meat. He's drawn a lot of lands, so that...
He has been flooded. His library should be denser with threats than Dave's.
Oh, boy.
But Drake Haven is... Oh, geez, yeah. The Drake Haven's the bomb, and that Haymaker, David had it answered. Turn 3, forsake the worldly, get out!
Catcher's name is interesting. Now, there's not that many instants in Dave's deck, so Reid knows exactly which ones he's got to play around. He's going to be thinking about that card. He's got a lot of toughness. You can't really overstate how much. He can put 5 toughness on 2 creatures, 4 toughness on 2 additional creatures, and try and not get blown out.
Only the 1 zombie to pick up Menace, though, so that's not super well.
Yeah, the Menace is not...
God, it's 5 creatures to 5 creatures.
The Menace thing is still attractive in the sense that the zombie will get 5 power, so it can take out the Serpent. But yeah, what is that going to leave Dave in a great spot? It could even be 4/6 Menace attacking alone. It would still die, but you take out the Serpent.
But if you turn the Lord sideways, Reid has to line up 5 single blocks. If Dave just attacks with everything,
yeah, but the 6/5 on the 2, the 6/5 on the 2/3 is like too perfect though. Although with Sweltering, you're right. There's a lot of choices here from Dave's side of the board, and waiting is certainly a choice as well. Okay, my deck's probably got a bunch more zombies in it. This Creditor's Name not going anywhere. I would be worried about the land ratio in my deck versus my opponent's. I suspect, given the number of lands Reid has drawn, Dave might not want this game to go on another 5 turns because that might mean 4 spells for Reid and 2 spells for Dave.
Wow.
2 of the lands left in Dave's deck unlock 6/6 trample. So I should. Right. That's a really important footnote to, like, because there's always that game of who has inevitability, or who does waiting benefit, right? Does sitting around doing nothing in this game state benefit Reid or Dave? And so I'm just talking about some of the different inputs in that calculation. And one of them is who's got more lands remaining. Another one, thinking about, well, Dave has the 6/6 that's uncastable. He's still mana screwed in a limited sense. Mm-hmm. So waiting around might help him, all else equal. So it's not obvious to me.
His deck's like half land, though, right?
Right.
We only see 7, and he's discarded 1 and cycled 1. I guess that's 8, 9. What's he playing, 17?
Probably 17.
So 7 spells, 8 land in his deck at this point?
But 2 of those land are better than any spell.
Fair.
He cast the 6/6. So, yeah, he only played 16 land in his deck, Dave.
I love it. Paul Rietzl in chat says, I just want the record to reflect I have no idea what Dave should do. That's awesome.
So the judges that are watching right now are thinking, "Sir, I'm going to need you to make a play." But I like sitting here and thinking about it. I mean, I could chew on this all day. I think the double blocks that the number of different double blocks, I guess if it's just those who serve attacks alone with menace, then it's an obvious. It's Cryptic Serpent and Crab, and you're going to see the Innocatcher's Name and those who serve traded for the Serpent. That doesn't seem as good to me as waiting, so I think I would knock that. I would eliminate that.
How many creatures die? How many creatures of Dave's die if he just turns everything sideways and plays Innocatcher's Name?
You took the words out of my mouth. That's what I would say next. I said, okay, so I've ruled out menace attack with only that. Now what happens if I attack with everything?
I think he only loses 1 creature. He only loses a creature to the Serpent. Everybody, it's all single blocks, and Reid has 2 power, 1 power, 2 power, 1 power. So the Cryptic Serpent gets to pick its food, but that's it. So then how many of Reid's creatures, don't several of Reid's creatures die post Innocatcher's Name?
Well,
it's a 4-power Soul Stinger. It's a 4-power Supply Caravan. Like, only the Crab can survive that. It's a 4-power Lord of the Accursed, and it's a 5-power Those Who Serve.
Yeah, so the blocks would be
3 creatures, and Dave loses 1.
Crab on Soul Stinger, and also, I mean, think about the Kopesh. Dave has to not only decide what to attack with, but where to put the Kopesh. And that might have been the last thing that he thought about. He ultimately looks at it. He's going to play the waiting game. I think maybe having the Hydra in hand is maybe the kind of the difference maker there. I think maybe he's thinking like me, where normally eight of my lands would be really bad. In this particular spot, only 6 of my lands are bad, and 2 of them are bombs. So I think that's maybe what was the difference maker for Dave as he looked at this.
Their 2 top decks are going to cancel each other out.
I would Sweltering Suns if I was Reid.
Oh, interesting.
I guess he's afraid the Kopesh moves, and I guess the Kopesh would move.
Oh, yeah,
If you thought too quickly and said, "Oh, I'll just Sweltering Suns everything away," you might run into that Kopesh. So Reid's absolutely correct. You have to Essence Scatter there.
I will say,
a second to catch it.
Another reason for Dave to just play the waiting game is if nothing happens, he wins. He's going to deck Reid, right? It's 13 cards to 8. So the pressure's actually on Reid, who has to deal 23 damage.
Well, unless Reid can somehow draw a compelling argument.
It's only 5 cards? As he still gets decked by Reid draws the next card. It's not enough. Doesn't close the gap.
So he's got to get Dave to use the Evolving Wilds.
Oh, and then he can deck compelling argument. But meanwhile, this Supply Caravan would like to help David go a little wider.
Yeah. So Reid trying to take the Soul Stinger, trade the Soul Stinger for one of these creatures. It's really important to do so because otherwise Sweltering Suns ends up killing your Serpent. So in a kind of sneaky way, this block, it's really important to get the Soul Stinger out of the board. And Dave if Dave is playing really above the rim, he moves the counters onto the Serpent. Wow, the Innocatcher's Name is getting used here.
Well, this means his creature survives.
But then did he put a 5-power creature first? Okay, so Dave Dave just made a mistake there.
Yeah, he ordered the blockers wrong, didn't he?
Yeah, he could have had a 2/4 in the graveyard right now.
I actually like keeping his creature alive, but yeah, he should have killed a creature. But whatever. Supply Caravan brought a warrior token. Dave is set up to attack for the win next turn. He did all of that right. The Sweltering Suns kills 3 on one side, 1 on the other.
Yeah, I really don't like the way Dave played that last turn. I think that's he didn't get enough value out of Inakacha's name, and he didn't play around Sweltering Suns, one of the 9 remaining cards in Reid's deck or whatever, you know. And so I just don't know how I don't know how he thought that was the turn. But anyways, pull for tomorrow, interesting. Reid now down to 5 cards.
The attack was all to turn on Supply Caravan. Like, I totally get wanting to sneak in an attack. Pull from tomorrow for 2 is what Reid decides he needs to do. He figured he was going to have to Sweltering Suns anyway, because he's dead on board. Okay, didn't find any better answer than Sweltering Suns. I'm not sure why 2 was the number. Oh, these 5 lands are for his choice of final reward or horror.
Like, I don't on Dave's turn, I don't think the extra 1/1 token is even worth the mana. Like, you just move the Kopesh to something so that you're playing around Sweltering Suns. Save the Inakacha's name, another way of kind of playing around that card, but also just you have that in the tank for the ultimate all-out attack. So that misstep, it looks pretty costly from this vantage point.
But Reid still obliged to deal 20 plus damage in 5 turns. So leaves himself 4 blockers for Dave's 4 creatures. Yeah, I'm not sure Williams has an attack.
No, and this is actually, so Dave's at 18, yes, but things really, really swung heavily. That Cartouche of Knowledge, it takes a turn off of Reid's. Reid only has 4 cards in his deck, but the board now is really impressive for Reid.
Can he even afford to play Cartouche of Knowledge?
It depends what Dave has left in his library, and Reid is going to try to figure that out. We might be sitting here for a moment, just if you think about, or maybe Reid's already aware. He may be crossing things out.
All right, Cryptic Serpent to the air. Draw a card, down to 3 cards in library, and 1 life is Reid Duke. But he's got a 7/6 flyer.
Going the 3-turn clock route. Oh, wow. Wow.
Edifice of Authority.
The line that Reid took, right or wrong, it's completely foiled by the Edifice of Authority. That, let me just kill you in 3 turns with this 1 flyer. Now, there may have only been 1 card in Dave's deck that neutralizes that Serpent, but Dave drew it. And that's huge.
Exiles the Soul Stinger.
At this point, Dave could even chump block the horror.
Reid it 2 cards. He's got this attack and 2 more attacks. I feel like Reid's going to be able to bash through on the ground at this point.
I think you're forgetting how many of those. I think you're forgetting how many of those creatures are just, dung beetles. Like,
I see 2 horrors.
I know it's Dune Beetle, but I'm trying to, use a pejorative dung beetle. I'm sure the Dune Beetle's been hearing that its whole life. It's been hearing dung beetle. It's sick of being teased. But what am I going to say? If it had some more power, then Reid could actually maybe close this game out. From this position, it doesn't look good for Reid, in my view. The first attack gets through 2 damage. In fact, Reid doesn't even see that he can make the attack and survive, which is obviously true, right? Reid is at 1, so pretty interesting. Dave with another creature that's going to help out even more.
Yeah, shift the turn. Edifice is going to turn off the flyer. Reid is about to draw half his library. 2 cards turns into 1. Splendid Agony. What does that do?
So Dave wisely put the Kopesh on the 3/1. that's not gonna be the difference, I don't think. But it makes the Splendid Agony a little bit worse. But Reid is now down to 2 attack steps. This one and the one on the following turn.
That's it.
Next turn doesn't get any better than this turn, presumably. So Reid's going to have to try to make some headway this turn, and he can't really. Well, I shouldn't say can't. Next turn he won't be able to cycle because he'll have an empty library. That also doesn't help him. Although it's hard to imagine Horror of the Broken Lands not being blocked from here on that final turn. So Reid this turn has a board that represents 2 damage because again 6 attackers, 4 blockers, and the lowest power creatures have only 1 power. They don't even attack, so Dave can take 0.
He's got to guard against the counter block. He's got to guard against the counter attack too, right? He has to make sure he has blockers. So that's bounce, 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 trade.
No, it's kill, and then the Splendid Agony killing both the Supply Caravans is pretty big. I don't think it's a difference maker, but that's as good as it could have worked out.
That is an insane Splendid Agony.
Reid is really 1 card in library short, right? If you look at how this played out, and if the top card of Reid's deck is a removal spell, then it looks like Reid has just enough.
Yeah, Reid's currently attacking for 8, but it's an island.
And so wow.
Reid Duke has 0 cards left in his library, 1 life. That last 3/5, Edifice flanks the Serpent, 3/5 blocks the Horror. Reid gets through for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If he was allowed to cycle compelling arguments, he would win the game on the triggers.
Well, he's allowed to cycle it for any judges watching. He's allowed to do that. It won't work out as he intends. But he's allowed to do it. Oh, there he goes.
Got to go out on your own terms.
I like that. So Reid falls on his sword, and wow. We still have a game 3 to play? That's what you're telling me? Okay.
Yes.
Buckle up.
Game 3 to play. Late start, work it out great. It's already past midnight on the East Coast. We got this match. We may have 3 rounds after this. We go the full 9. 4 Magic. These games have been so sweet, too.
Yeah. As I look at these decks, I like the way Reid's deck matches up, I think. Most of your viewers might not have even been. That game was so long, they might not have even seen the turn 3 cast Drakehaven, immediately get it disenchanted.
Yep.
And that was like a clear and obvious turning point. That was really, even though it happened really quickly, there was no play that was more impactful than that. Reid wins that game in a runaway, if not for that turn 3 play. And then so that's really the strength of Reid's deck. The strength of Dave's deck is it's probably a little bit tighter. The distribution of power, like his average card or his median card, whatever you want, it seems pretty good. Reid has some high value cards and some super low value cards. Some cards that are really intended only to cycle those, get you closer to the cards that matter, and they also trigger certain things. So kind of different decks, a very vanilla-ish mid-rangey deck, and then a more spell combo-driven cycling deck. I think it favors Reid if you played a large number of games, but on the other hand, I think so much more can go wrong for Reid when you're relying on one, 2, or 3 key cards. Dave's just going to put 2/4 on the board, 3/5 on the board, and hope that they attack, which sounds kind of silly. The Kopesh helps.
There's the Forest he couldn't find last game.
Trespasser's Curse against a deck with like 8 creatures? So that's interesting, but that's potentially like a turn 2 Lava Axe. Fascinating. So Dave going deep into the tank and finding Trespasser's Curse.
No white mana in this draw for Dave. Yeah, there's the Forest. And there it is, Trespasser's Curse. Which player do you think you'll enchant, Matt?
I suspect it'll be Reid this time. Reid with no creatures in hand. So even though the curse showed up right on time, it's not doing anything. Dave finds another white card rather than a plains. This is a game where nobody has anything going on. We're going to start the game on turn 5, 6, or 7.
Yeah, Reid. It should be a not like this moment for your team, but there's no punish. There's nothing resembling a punish for this color screw.
Yeah, the draw of Cryptic Serpent changes things quite a bit. Reid can now start cycling stuff. The Serpent gets cheaper. Eventually, gets a second island, and then if Reid finds that second island in short order, then Dave might be dead.
Hasn't found it yet.
Has not. Finds 2 more black
In fact,
spells.
is he discarding here? He's on 8 cards.
Wow.
He's been sitting on Essence Scatter the entire game.
So this looks like this looks like what used to happen when you say go against a draw go player and make them hit their land drops. Dave inadvertently saying, so I wonder when he sees the quality of this discard.
Splendid Agony.
If he draws a plains, he might just say go. Okay, no. So Dave, I mean, Splendid Agony was the discard. How crazy is that? If you're Dave.
I know, I hear you. I can actually imagine just not playing this Lord of the Accursed. Right? Seems crazy, but
it's like playing into account. It's right. It's like playing against draw go, and you're just playing your Jackal Pup into 5-0 man. No, I'd rather let them discard. So there's the Electrify. Violent Impact.
Violent Impact. Reid probably would have been tapping out for Violent Impact rather than discard. I don't know.
Yeah, I think he cycles it.
Well, he does now that he's not. I mean, if Dave hadn't played the Lord of the Accursed, Dave gave him something to trade a card with, and then Reid whiffed on the land drop again. Man, and meanwhile, Williams is completely color screwed.
All right, but there's the island, and the island changes everything.
Yes, it does. Yeah, down comes Cryptic Serpent. 2 mana. That seems fair. Oh, Trespasser's Curse.
Yeah, don't forget the Trespasser's Curse trigger.
Now we're in not like this mode.
Yeah, and Reid knows Dave doesn't have.
Still no planes.
Zone.
Cartouche of Knowledge. The 7/6 flyer from last game is back.
Oh, this game's over. Yeah, this game's done. I mean, I guess the Edifice of Authority is the only thing I can think of.
Edifice, but you know what? He cycled the Violent Impact. Hilarious. I thought you could Violent Impact the Edifice. Yep, here's 7/6, and wow, Peach Garden Oath. After David pulled off that miraculous game 2, decking Reid Duke.
Wow.
He gets color screwed in game 3, and it's Reid who evens up the overall team match. 3 wins for Scottsdale Foundation, 3 wins for Peach Garden Oath.
Now, I'm slightly less excited than you about that, but I agree it's going to lead to more magic. So,
you guys had a 3-1 lead. Look, that was a bad round for you. Basically, you guys split the first round. You 2-0'd the second round, but they returned the favor in round 3. So we are going to go 1 match at a time from here on out. Next up, it's still going to be Reid. He is going to be playing against Paul Rietzl. And we're going to throw to commercials so we can get set up for that match. Dave Williams and Owen Turtenwald are lined up to do the commentary.
Awesome.
Stay tuned, guys.
Here we go.
3, all tied up. We'll be right back.
Looking for a challenge? Magic Online